Well, everybody, welcome to 5 and 15. Glad to have you with us here today. And as you know, we started these with 5 quick tips in 15 minutes, and we've moved on to talking to, partly because of COVID-19, or because we moved on to talking about leaders within the food system, talking with leaders within the food system, agriculture all the way out to food. Last time we had a design thinker, this big picture. Today we're going to take a dive into the beef industry with somebody who knows a lot about that. We are fortunate to have Lee Leachman from Leachman Cattle Company with us, a Harvard graduate, a guy who's big on data, who's a rancher, who knows about, who's got beef deep in his heritage, and really has some interesting ideas on improving not just beef, but our food system in general. So with that, Lee, let you introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about your company and what you do.
You bet, Mark. So we're in the bull raising business. I quip with people that I'm a bull shipper, and you have to be careful to say that well.
You did.
We do. We send bulls all over the high plains, mostly of the western United States, and we're in this really traditional business of raising bulls. But what's cool is that technology is, as it is in all agriculture, it's starting to significantly impact the way we're raising cattle. So we're all about measuring and evaluating beef cattle and trying to select them using the big data to be more profitable. I think, we come from an industry that really historically was very visually oriented, visually driven. I mean, my grandfather selected cattle that would win at the show, and that's how they marketed them. Our business, when my father's generation was in, was still very visually oriented, but we started to weigh and measure animals. And of course now, we're into genomics and simulation models and coordinated supply chains and specific optimization of traits depending on the particular needs. And so things have really come a long way, and there's some interesting things on the horizon as well.
Yeah. Now, Lee, that's not that's not the world's stereotypical image of a cattle rancher. That's one of the things all of us who work in agriculture face, right? Now there are people with us today who are putting seeds in the ground, raising animals, all the way out to retail food, even grocery and restaurants and food processing. And that's one of the stereotypes we deal with, right? Is they don't understand that agriculture is, and really the whole food production chain is very technology oriented now. But I want to start with a little bit, has COVID, which is how we got into these interviews, has COVID caused much of a shift in your day-to-day? Or, you're kind of out there on the range, and if people go to Leachman Cattle, they'll see, pictures of what we think about ranching. How has COVID had an effect on you so far? Or has it? Maybe it hasn't. Oh, you and I did talk with you when you're in the airport when you had a face mask, so I know it had that.
Yeah. Travel's been significantly curtailed, but probably the biggest thing that happened to us, Mark, is on March 23rd we had an auction.
Yeah.
And that auction would normally draw people from 32 states, and we'd have 400 attendees. And there were 13 distinct buyers sitting in the audience on March 23rd. And I'm going to tell you, as a bull seller, who thrives on the auction and having people there and the enthusiasm, it was probably one of the most frightful occurrences in my 30-year career.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. I mean, obviously agriculture has gone on. I mean, that's the big lesson during COVID, right? We're an industry where you're not going to not plant your crops. You're not going to not feed your cattle. You're gonna turn bulls out with your cows and breed them so there's a calf crop next year. And so agriculture marched on throughout this period of COVID-19. And at the end of the day, we ended up selling 500 bulls that day. A big chunk of them sold on order to buyers representatives that we have. A chunk of them sold over the internet using Superior Livestock's broadcast system. And at the end of the day, we had a sale that if you looked at the trends in prices and volume, you wouldn't have even noticed a blip. And then
so you were able to move to the virtual world with a lot of it and be pretty much as successful. That's great to hear. And that's a story we're hearing elsewhere in agriculture. And a tribute to ag, I got to tell you, we work in different segments of it here at CO, and a lot of agriculture is finding a way.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be flexible. I mean, that's the thing. If you get entrenched in a distribution system and a supply methodology, you can really get stuck today. But it's showing us that if we're nimble, and obviously technology lets us be nimble, boy, we can. I would tell you, we had the best sales season this spring we've ever had post our auction, because a lot of people didn't go to some auctions. We did an enormous amount of business with people that didn't even come to look. They called us and bought through our remote systems.
That speaks to trust. And by the way, I have to do a little side note. I'm Mark Gale, CEO at CO. We work in marketing and communication, sometimes crisis, across the food system. And now my team isn't going to get on me when we finish this. So, but any rate, so let's get to genetics. And I saw a fascinating thing. I always do a little probing around, and you have this example where there's this bull. They weigh the same. They're both going to produce offspring. You know where I'm going. I think one of them eats 17 pounds of feed a day. One of them eats 42 pounds of feed a day. And I saw the pictures, and they both look pretty good. And so I thought, wow, that's a good representation. Those bulls are representatives of really the philosophy. Is that, kind of the philosophy of genetics? And could you tell us a little bit about how your journey from, traditional, from your grandfather there to what you're doing now, which is pretty sophisticated with your modeling?
Yeah, so we had an epiphany back in 2003. My family business was in Montana prior to 2003. We moved to Colorado that year. My new partner, Dallas Horton, said to me one morning, he said, I'm going to buy some bulls out of our sale. He was my business partner. He said, which one should I buy? And I said, well, Dallas, what do you want? And he said, I want the bulls that are going to make more money. And I nodded and I said, well, what traits do you want? Because we think in terms of traits. Do you want them to grow faster, get bigger? Do you want them to have more marbling? Do you want a cow that eats less? What do you want?
Are they going to calf easier?
Yeah. And he said, no, I just want to make more money. Which one's going to make the most money? And I said, we can't answer that question.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, we're going to answer that question.
Ouch.
And so then fortunately we went out and we found some folks that had a very sophisticated simulation model that took the genetic inputs that we have and simulated the outcome. And then we started asking questions, what parts of that outcome don't we know enough about? And really, I think in like a lot of agriculture, we first focused on maximizing output. Then we changed our direction and said, no, we really need to focus on maximizing profitability. And to do that, we need to look at input costs. And so input costs for cattle, your primary differentiator is feed. And so we said, we really need to measure feed intake. And actually it was interesting. My partner at the time had done quite a bit of that measurement. It turns out the trait's highly heritable. So it's inherited and it's highly variable. And that's what that graphic you're referring to showed these two bulls. And okay. I mean, over the course of the year, one of those bulls ate like 4 tons more feed.
So it's just genetically predisposed not to be, efficient in terms of.
I mean, I'm sure there's people on the line that are familiar with the genetics in poultry and swine, but they've made enormous progress over the last 50 years on improving their feed conversion. And beef cattle have made progress, but relatively small progress, because all we did was increase output per day, which does increase efficiency. But it turns out if you measure efficiency, you can improve it much more rapidly. And so, now we're into improving feed efficiency as it relates to improving overall profitability. And the model tells us whether we should, select the one that grows the fastest and ate average, or the one that grew fast and ate below average, or the one that grew average and ate way below average.
Right. Yeah. So previously, just how big it was after 30 days or whatever isn't really telling the story. Now, okay, so you bring up an interesting point, because we're going to get to sustainability here in a moment, which is something you and I have talked about and heard you talk about. So you see these, you've seen these, a lot of people here listening have, and it's always salmon that's compared, it seems, 1.1 pounds of feed or something produces a pound of salmon. But in your example here, to have a universal number for beef really doesn't tell the story. Doesn't tell the story at all, because there's a radical difference in that example you're showing. Is that a common thing, or what's happening with the beef herd? Is the herd, broader air quotes, moving that direction? And then we're going to move into sustainability of feed conversion and methane. I know you've got some interesting ideas on that, some other things.
So the industry's just starting to measure it. You have to have, so to measure feed efficiency, we actually have to know which animal's eating, and we have to weigh the bunk. And because we need to know how much that animal's eating. And there's some great machines now that do that. And so it's starting to happen, but unfortunately it's still only, I would say it's somewhere between 1% and 3% of the seed stock in the country are measured that way. And so it's just starting to catch on, and you're starting to see EPDs pop up that measure it. But the rank and file of the industry hasn't quite adopted the use of the technology yet. So we're still kind of on the cutting edge of it, Mark.
Okay. And you feel that, I heard you say that you feel that you can improve carbon footprint of beef, another thing, by 20 to 30% through, the use of big data and genetics. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, there's probably two easy lifts on the carbon footprint of cattle. Okay. I mean, one is to alter what they're eating so that they chemically produce less methane, and all kinds of people are looking at that. You probably saw the recent Burger King little quip about lemongrass, but what we're looking at from a cattle standpoint, just like what happened in swine and poultry, is if we can make those animals gain more per pound of feed they eat, they're going to produce less methane per pound of edible beef that we get. And I think it's quite clear to us that in the very short term, we can improve that by in excess of 10%. And it's a highly heritable trait. It's probably the most heritable trait we look at right now, or at least one of the most. And so I think the long-term prospect is we're going to see feed conversion of cattle go down, just like it has in chickens and pigs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you think that'll really continue to shift perception of beef, really?
Well, I mean, the key today, I mean, without spending a lot of time talking about methane, we think of how much methane goes up into the atmosphere every year, but what really matters is how much methane is there, right? You can think of it like a pool, okay? So there's this pool of methane sitting in the sky trapping heat, right? So one question is how much is going up every day. The other question is any of it dissipating. And the great thing with methane is methane dissipates. So methane lasts 10 years and leaves, okay? The other, greenhouse gases we dump into the atmosphere mostly stay for a very long time. So if we can diminish how much methane goes up from cattle, we can actually have a huge net change in the amount of greenhouse gas that's in the atmosphere. With the other gases, you have to stop emitting them. With methane, if you put less in than you're taking out, then the total drops, and it would have a big effect. And I think that's what everything is focused at from our industry at this point. How do we reduce that methane, whether it's a digester digesting waste at a feedlot, or altering how much the cattle eat to produce, or changing the way we grow crops so that we don't release as much carbon.
Yeah, and now Lee, before we run out of time, so what other, you're talking about profitability. When you look forward, and obviously you're a very forward-thinking guy, and I love this. To me, your business idea, and I'm sure it's just your innate intelligence, your Harvard training come out. You have this thing, mindset, capital, expertise in terms of barriers to moving a business forward. And there is also this tendency, I think, for people to think that agriculture is static. it's not at all. You're showing us that. What, look ahead, look ahead. Where do you think, your crystal ball, where's the beef industry going? Where do you hope to take your company in terms of genetic analysis and the benefits you can provide? Our design thinker 2 weeks ago was talking about creating the ideal scenario for the future for their customers. Where do you think that's going for you and Leachman Cattle Company?
I think the industry as a whole is going to continue to move away from the commodity mindset. And we're going to see, I wouldn't say we're going to see integrated supply chains. We're going to see coordinated supply chains. We're going to see a supply chain that targets specific consumers with a particular combination of attributes. And we're going to line up genetics and ranchers and feedlotters and a packing plant to supply that consistently. And I think when that starts to happen, our entire industry becomes much more responsive to consumer demands. And I think that's a really good thing. I think that, probably in the commodity traits, we tend to be less responsive to consumer demand, whereas in a branded or integrated system, those businesses are extremely responsive. And I think we have suffered by not having that. And of course, we'll worry about losing our freedom or our autonomy. But the reality is there's so much more opportunity if we meet those demands well. If we satisfy those consumers consistently. Just look at the success the Certified Angus beef brand has had and how that's altered the landscape of beef production. I think there are lots of opportunities to add a wide array of characteristics or attributes to the product, and it requires a coordinated chain to do that. And I think that's coming because we have systems now that can do that, right? I mean, everybody said, well, what's blockchain do? Well, that's what blockchain is going to do. It's going to allow us to coordinate, and we can change genetics, we can change management, we can change presentation of the product. And I think that's an exciting time for me. I mean, I've been waiting for this probably for 30 years. And I think
well, I think I read, and we're running out of time here. I'm sorry. It always goes too fast. It's like, what? I'm looking at this, this thing must be telling me the wrong time. I know it's the wrong time because we've only been talking for like 3 minutes. But no, I guess I would give a compliment to you. I think you're helping to create that future. And honestly, as marketers, we love that idea. I mean, you're right. Society is changing. Consumers are changing. Part of it is us to be on offense and, to be the ones creating our own future. I mean, that's part of my belief is that let's create our own future. And, you're using big data, big technology to do that. Any parting thoughts you want to give us about, well, maybe I'll ask you one. So what part you're a bull shipper, a bull seller? You're definitely not a BSer. What part do you want to play with that further integration and moving the entire supply chain forward?
So I'm probably most excited, we talk about precision agriculture, okay?
Yeah.
We don't have precision animal management in beef cattle. We don't manage individual animals very well. And because we don't, we're leaving a lot of waste in the system, okay? Wasted resources from a variety of angles. I would really love to be at a significant contributor to the ability to manage an animal throughout its lifetime for specific targets on a precision methodology. And I think there's all kinds of, we could talk for 2 hours about that. Yeah. There's all kinds of technologies going to come to bear on that, but it takes data, right? I mean, if we look at what happens today in swine and poultry, I mean, literally they know, if you do this on day 10, it's going to have this impact on day 50. We don't have that precision in beef cattle, and it's costing us a lot of money today. So lots of opportunity, exciting times, because just as we've learned to precision plant these fields and how that's changed production, the same thing's going to happen with beef cattle. We're going to learn to precision manage these animals.
Wow, that's a great statement. We're going to leave you with that. So Leachman Cattle Company, Lee Leachman, look him up. He's on the internet. They're out there, and obviously a forward thinker. thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to hear somebody who's shaping and has a real view of the future of the industries that we love so much. So Lee, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep. I'm Mark Gale, CEO at CO. Thanks for joining us for 5 and 15. As always, interesting discussion. And Lee, wish you well. Stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.